Welcome to Whores Talk Horror.
We're not really whores. We just like wordplay.
Hello and welcome to Whores Talk Horror. I'm Sharon.
I'm Melinda.
Since it's Halloween season, we decided to do an entire episode where we talk about some of the horror movies that we've been watching this season. Okay, and before we start talking about any movies, we're just going to say it right now. Spoiler alert, there's going to be spoilers. All right, here we go. The new Suspiria, directed by Luca Guadagnino. I think I'm saying that right. The original Suspiria, directed by Dario Argento. And the only other movie that I've seen by Luca Guadagnino is Call Me By Your Name, which I actually really liked. This movie, not so much. All right, so let's just get into the movie. Right off the bat, number one, the original. The art direction, the sets, the color palette were so gorgeous. They were so, everything was just so bright and saturated with color. The first thing you notice is how drab and dull the color palette in this movie is, which I heard the director say it was intentional.
I literally have written down in my notes that the remake pales, no pun intended, in comparison to the original.
I was actually going to write that same exact thing, but I was like, that's too punny.
Although, except for Dakota Johnson's hair, can we just talk about that for a second?
Her hair was gorgeous.
Really? I thought it was, I understood stylistically why, she had this bright red hair, but I thought it was so unflattering on her.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of disagree.
Huh. Okay.
And
Interesting.
I thought with her really, really pale skin, it looked beautiful. I don't know. I love redheads. I was a redhead for a very long time, so.
I do too, but I just didn't think, I don't know. Maybe it was because everything else was just so drab.
That honestly didn't bother me. I thought it was really pretty. Next is that even though the plot of the original movie is not super complex, it's the set design, the color, and the sound that make the original so good. And instead of hearing the original scores by Goblin from the original movie, they're so atmospheric and just kind of haunting and creepy, and it's really, really unique, the music in Suspiria, and it's kind of hard to describe. And while I am a fan of Radiohead,
I was waiting for this,
and Tom York, his song for the beginning of the movie, it was a really beautiful song, I felt, but it can't do what the original soundtrack did. Also, it was kind of absent from the entire film, except for I think the beginning and the end of the film.
Yeah.
Whereas Goblins, their music is played all throughout the original Suspiria.
It drives it.
It totally.
Yeah.
It drives the tension. We might have some. I kind of want to put some of the music in here.
And honestly, I think that the filmmakers would probably say, well, we pull that line, we're not looking to be compared to the original, or we're not trying to remake the original, but...
Well, why don't you read Dario Argento's quote now?
Yeah.
Speaking of which.
But my point is that what they're bringing to the story, it's not enough. It's too thin, and But Dario Argento, thanks to IMDb, we found this awesome quote from an interview he did with IndieWire from August 2016, and he said, quote, "Either you do it exactly the same way, in which case it's not a remake, it's a copy, which is pointless, or you can change things and make another movie. In that case, why call it Suspiria?" And I totally agree with that. I kind of feel like they should have named this movie something else and then just been sort of inspired by the original. It was a different movie.
I do have to say, though, I will give the movie credit that the choreography and the set design of the very last scene was gorgeous.
Yes.
I mean, that was a beautifully, beautifully shot scene.
And when Dakota Johnson first shows up and does her little audition, or no, it's when she takes the lead role in rehearsal. Mm-hmm. So what did you think about the sacrifice of that other girl?
That scene was really, really hard for me to watch.
Yeah.
So basically there's a scene in the movie where Dakota Johnson is dancing, and there's another dancer who has kind of figured out what's going on in this dance school and is trying to leave and trying to make other people aware, and they torture this poor girl by putting her in another room. And while Dakota Johnson's dancing, her body is just like contorting and flailing all over the place, which Spencer actually read some trivia, and I guess she's very hypermobile, and a lot of those movements, that was actually her.
Ew.
I know, it was pretty gross. That was definitely a very, very disturbing scene and very hard to watch. That part creeped me out, but the rest of it, it was just so slow. There was no tension being built up during the movie. There was no scares. I don't know. It fell short on so many levels. I wouldn't recommend this movie. I would definitely recommend people check out the original. But I guess if you're curious like I was, watch it.
It's free on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
If you have Amazon Prime right now.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to pay for it. That's all. What would you recommend this movie?
I wouldn't, unless the other thing I wrote down was because Tilda Swinton did play this male doctor character. Jessica Harper who is the original Susie Bannion from the original film. She has a small cameo in the movie as the doctor's wife. Mm-hmm. And I literally wrote down Jessica Harper and Tilda Swinton totes kissed.
They did.
So if you kind of want, if that kind of thing turns you on, like Tilda Swinton dressed as an old man kissing Jessica Harper, then yes, I think you should watch this movie. Otherwise, I would honestly say to stick to the original.
Agreed. All right, I think we spent way too much time talking about the remake of Suspiria. All right, so next, The Dead Don't Die, Jim Jarmusch's new movie, which, yes, we did mention, and I think our very, very first podcast that we did talking about summer horror movies. So, Mindy, what are your initial thoughts on this movie?
Initially, I was so excited because Jim Jarmusch, for some reason, when I watch his stuff, it's kind of like movie Xanax to me. Like, I don't know why. I love watching his movies and like meandering down his road movies and just going with it. And I just always really like enjoy his stuff. So early on, I was loving it. Yeah, I felt right at home. I mean, right off the bat, Tom Waits, of course, we get him, who's a regular in all of Jarmusch's stuff. The sense of humor, the small town America vibe, like all of it classic to him. Adam Driver is in the film, and the phrase he kept saying was, this isn't going to end well, over and over again, which was a clear like take on, I've got a bad feeling about this from Star Wars.
I really liked the combination of him and Bill Murray.
I actually wrote down too that Adam Driver and Bill Murray are the dream team I never knew I needed in my life. I thought they were great together. And then we hear tell of Steve Buscemi's character, who is like an ornery local farmer. Early on in the film, we see his character for the first time, and he has a hat on that says, "Make America White Again." And I was like, well, that's not
very
subtle.
Political.
Yeah.
Not subtle at all.
And then as the movie went on, and someone can correct me because I've seen most of Jarmusch's stuff, but clearly not all. It got meta and political in this way that I have not seen Jarmusch do before, and it was a little on the nose.
So you might not like it if you like a typical zombie movie, because this is not your typical zombie movie.
That's a good point.
The previews for this made me think it was going to be more of like a Shaun of the Dead type, just like over the top kind of crazy, funny zombie movie, or maybe something like Zombieland, but it's extremely slow moving. Yeah, it's basically Jim Jarmusch's social commentary on how we are all like zombies because we are hooked to our phones, we are hooked to the internet, we are, sucked into politics, we are sucked into material possessions. This is the only zombie movie, I think, where I've seen zombies actually talk instead of just like moaning and whining. The zombies were actually, they would see something that they were transfixed on in real life, like coffee or Skittles, and they would just walk around saying like Skittles.
Well, and there was
phone.
there was somebody who literally was like Wi-Fi.
Yes, there was a zombie saying Wi-Fi. I will say though that I thought it was really funny in the very first zombie scene where the zombies go into the diner and the one zombie's like coffee. It totally reminded me of Dougie Jones from season 3 of Twin Peaks.
That, and I was thinking the Black Lodge, the way it sounds when in the finale of season 1 of Twin Peaks, where they're back and forth, coffee.
Yeah.
And, yeah. They break the fourth wall in this movie, basically. And Adam Driver keeps saying over and over again, which this made me laugh. I have a feeling this is going to end badly. And at one point, Bill Murray is just like, shut up, and just freaks out on him. He's like, how do you know it's going to end badly? And Adam Driver's like, well, I read the script. And I literally was like, what? I'm sorry, what? And Bill Murray says, well, I only had our scenes. I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, after all I've done for that guy, you don't even know that fucker. Which, that made me laugh, because Bill Murray's obviously collaborated with Jim Jarmusch quite a bit. But I was also like, wait, why is this happening? Because I don't think he's ever done that, for sure.
No. I've not seen as many of his movies as you have, but nothing that comes to mind.
Tilda Swinton was a delightful weirdo in this as well. But then she got sucked up as an alien into an alien spaceship, and I was kind of like, okay, the whole joke about like Tilda Swinton not being from this earth is kind of long past. So it felt,
it was a very meta movie.
I was surprised, I guess. I got really surprised. So I really liked it a lot until like midway through, and I still say that I liked it, but I just am confused as to why it's so preachy.
Directors, they change their styles. I don't know how long it's been since he's made a movie before this one, but obviously the political climate in this country has been really, really fucked up for the last 3 or 4 years, heading into the election and then after the election, whatever. We're not going to get into a fucking political conversation right now at all, but it is definitely made people fucking change the way they look at the world. So he might have felt he needed to make this movie because of that. That's my guess.
That's actually what I wrote down, is I was like, well, but is maybe this necessary right now?
This movie was not at all what I expected. I did like it. I thought the pace and the humor of the movie were kind of Lynchian, but I think Lynch does it way better. Also, great cast, and it does pick up a little bit of steam halfway through the movie, and I thought there was some pretty graphic zombie killings. I would recommend it, but just know what you're about to watch. I think that's why it did so bad in the theaters, is because obviously if it was billed as a slow political commentary zombie movie, I don't think many people would have gone to see it, but at least people would have known what they were signing up for. All right, so let's talk about the Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is on Netflix. It has Emile Hirsch, whom I love because of Into the Wild. I love that movie so much. And
I've never seen that one still.
What? Oh my God. I'm obsessed with that movie. I've seen it so many times and read the book, and the soundtrack by Eddie Vedder is amazing. I'm shocked that you haven't seen it. You should totally watch it. It's so fucking good.
I know what it is, and it's one of those things that I haven't like not seen it for like just because I don't want to. Like I just haven't gotten around to it. But
and it's got a great cast, and I think after Halloween month is over and we're taking a small break from horror movies, I'll have you over and we'll watch it together, because I haven't seen it in years and I would love to watch it again.
Okay.
Anyways, but yes, it has Emile Hirsch and
Brian Cox.
Is that who plays his father?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes, Brian Cox, who is in Super Troopers, and he's been in a lot of shit. This movie I watched when Spencer was out of town. I watched it by myself, and I'm not gonna lie, it scared the fucking shit out of me. And I even remember at one point I like got up to get a drink or like go to the bathroom or something, but I walked past my office and I swear I saw like a white shadow or a white figure like walk by, and I was like, oh hell no. And I'm watching the rest of this movie with the lights on. It scared the crap out of me. I really, really, really enjoyed this movie. Highly recommend it. And I think maybe like 45 minutes into the movie, I texted Mindy and was like, I'm watching the Autopsy of Jane Doe. I'm like, fucking check it out.
I thought like it was a good like slow build of suspense. I thought like there were jumpy scares, but not like cheap ones. I actually wrote down dead people, visuals, creeptastic. So this is sort of getting into like the logistics of the movie. And this is a silly thing maybe to focus on, but for some reason, as I was watching it, I was like, I don't understand the layout of their house.
It's a house. In the basement is a morgue. And it looks like the basement in the morgue area is way, way, way bigger than their actual house. So I'm assuming it just like sprawls underground way past where the house is. In the beginning of the movie, they did show the one character leaving through like kind of like cellar doors that just went directly outside. That may be the only way to get into the house. And also, if it's an old farmhouse, I don't know how it was built. So I don't know if they had stairs that go down to the basement or if you only use the cellar doors. I don't fucking know. I don't really care. That was not an issue for me.
I don't know why I thought of that, but I was just like, huh?
Well, but also by not having stairs, it made it so that they were trapped in this morgue, which just made the whole movie more terrifying. Being trapped in a morgue with crazy shit happening and bodies coming to life and everything. I mean, what's more terrifying than that, really?
Right. Yeah, very claustrophobic.
Even though it was in such a big space, it was very claustrophobic. There was a very heightened sense of tension throughout the whole thing. And I also recommended this to another one of my friends. What up, Bridget? I recommended this for her to watch, and she watched it when her husband was working like overnights or something, and she said that she had a very hard time falling asleep that night. So this movie, if you're looking for a good scary movie, this definitely is it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I don't want to say much more about the plot or anything really. And I know we said spoilers at the beginning, but like it was definitely creepy. I was a little confused at times, but I think that was the point, because they do a good, let's just say they do a good job of kind of putting you in the mindset of these people that are trapped in this situation. And
I also think they do a pretty good job at the end explaining everything. It doesn't really leave you with a heightened sense of confusion or anything like that. It doesn't really, I wasn't disappointed with the ending.
Yeah.
I thought the explanation was sufficient to explain what was going on. Would you recommend it?
I would recommend it. I actually think I want to watch it again just to give it a second go around. And like, now that I've done the initial one, then I can like, knowing what happens, kind of rewatch it and then like wrap my head around it a little bit more. But yeah, I'd recommend it. I was not expecting it. Like, I just watched it because Sharon was like, you should watch this. And then I like really got into it and I was like, oh wait, this is creepy as fuck. So yeah.
I kind of hate to admit this, but I finally just watched Jacob's Ladder for the first time, which it's such a classic, I know, but
it's intense.
It's very intense. And the whole subject of the Vietnam War kind of always turned me off to it, just because my dad was in Vietnam and I don't really like watching movies about Vietnam because it freaks me out thinking about things that happened to him or things that he did or whatever. So finally I'm just like, fuck it, I need to watch this movie. And I watched it and I loved it. And yeah, the scenes in Vietnam were really hard to watch and pretty disturbing. And but overall, I mean, the movie is so good. You really like puts you inside of Tim Robbins' head, and it was actually kind of sad too. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Glad I finally watched it. And then this was a movie that we had on our trivia episode.
Yes, I'm dying to hear what you thought.
I watched Grave Encounters and I loved it. I thought it was
Isn't it good?
It is really good. And I don't watch the like ghost hunter shows like Mindy does, Ghost Adventure, whatever. I don't even really know the names of them just because I know they're all bullshit. And I like how this show totally made fun of that.
That's what I love too. Yeah.
But at the same time, I loved that they actually found a really haunted location, and the whole thing with time fucking with them, and just they're trapped, and time and space seem to keep like shifting and altering, and they just couldn't get out of this facility. And yeah, that was kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, and this is maybe another episode. I don't want to talk about like the ghost hunting television phenomenon too much, but first of all, I don't really watch Ghost Adventures because I don't really care for those guys that much. But I do think it's funny because the tone in terms of modern ghost hunting shows that are on right now, as opposed to like when like ghost hunters back in the day started, is that people like on Ghost Adventures tend to go in more like, we're going to find some fucking ghosts. And like, they're like dude bros that like yell at the ghosts and like swear and freak out and stuff like that. So, and then, yeah, do a lot of stuff obviously for attention, and most of it's probably bullshit, I think, with those guys. So I kind of liked the idea of this movie calling that out, but then like those same guys kind of getting what they had coming. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah. The main character in Grave Encounters is a total fucking douche, and I enjoyed what happened to him. So
there was a sequel. I think I watched 5 minutes of it and shut it off. I don't even remember what happened in it. And so I wouldn't recommend that one, but I would recommend the first one for sure.
And so now this was the movie that I was most excited about seeing this Halloween season. We discussed this on our summer Halloween movie episode, but we both went to go see 3 from Hell on opening day,
and we got a free poster because it was like a limited edition thing. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. And this is, for those of you who don't know, this is Rob Zombie's third installment of the House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects. This is the third movie in that series.
Regarding the Firefly family, which is confusing to those of us who are browncoats, shout out to all of you Firefly Serenity fans out there, because I'm used to Firefly being associated with a spaceship and not a killer family, but they are the family.
I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. But
people will know what I'm talking about. But this is the Firefly family.
Yes. I didn't have a ton of, I really went into it without a lot of expectation, because I really thought that The Devil's Rejects was going to be the last installment of that story. And I actually really liked it, but I'm going to say it was the least favorite of the 3 for me. I like the other 2 much more. But I wasn't disappointed. It was fun.
I thought it was great fun. So Sharon is the Rob Zombie fan, the big fan. I appreciate him very much for what he does, and just the fact that he has an original voice, for God's sakes. Like, nobody in horror these days, it's very rare to find that. But I had a blast watching this movie, and I thought it was funny, and despite the subject matter, I feel like it was lighter than the majority of his stuff that he's done, and I just enjoyed every second of it, and I can't wait to see it again, honestly. But it was really fun to see it in the theaters.
And I really liked that Baby, they made Baby kind of like the main character of this one, and she was a total fucking badass.
Absolutely, and I have such an appreciation for Sherry Moon Zombie.
And I also want to say I did not realize that Dee Wallace, who her character was in the movie, and I thought that her character was fucking awesome, and good job, like good makeup. I mean, they didn't even really do like too much, but she...
Also, you're welcome, Mindy, for finding that on IMDb, because we were like, we saw her name in the credits after the movie, and we were like, who the fuck was Dee Wallace? And then I sent you a text, I think, the next day, because I looked...
I mean,
online.
To be honest, I could have just gone to IMDb and looked myself. So.
Don't take away my
Don't
input.
give yourself too much credit for something that millions of people are able to do on their phones.
But it's true though. Like she had a cameo. They had a lot of cameos, and they were used very well. And that's what I like about Rob Zombie is that I feel like he brings at least like new ideas in a voice, and he draws on the history of horror to make a new statement or story or whatever.
Dee Wallace
and,
and PJ Souls and Sid Haig and like
Sid Haig.
Oh, and
Can we just take a moment?
Yes, let's.
Thank you, Sid Haig, for
everything. Take
everything.
a moment of silence for Sid Haig. All right. So I think
he was in this movie, but very briefly.
It's very briefly, and it was good to see him one last time. And
absolutely. And The Devil's Rejects, his scene where he steals the car with the little kid is like my favorite. That made me laugh so hard. Thank you, Sid Haig, for cracking me up.
So yeah, that's all we're really gonna say about that. One of the other movies that I watched was Deep Red, which is another Argento film, and I really, really enjoyed this movie. It reminded me of a Hitchcock movie. The music was also done by Goblin, who did the music for Suspiria.
The original
Suspiria, yes, thank you. Argento, from a cinematography standpoint, he does horror movies like no one else. His movies are so beautiful. There is one scene in the movie that mimicked the painting Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, who is one of my favorite artists. And
mine too.
It was just such a gorgeous scene. Like in Suspiria, his use of like the red paint to show blood, it's just so like thick and vibrant. It's gorgeous, and it's just different from a lot of the blood in other horror movies. He really makes murder look beautiful, honestly, and his attention to detail, you can tell he just puts so much effort into his work. It's just a beautiful movie. I love it.
How did you watch it? Was it on Shudder?
It was on Shudder.
It was on Shudder.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally recommend this movie.
Okay, so I actually watched. I had to rent it, but it's actually a documentary. I have two movies that I watched. One was Wrinkles the Clown, which I honestly can't recommend enough. It was made recently, but this whole story started in 2014. There's a gentleman who is, from what we know, because the documentary has a bit of a twist to it, but from what we know, there's a gentleman who is retired, living in Florida, and basically started advertising with like just simple stickers on like light posts, or he did eventually create a YouTube channel and a website where he basically is a clown for hire and is specifically in the genre of setting naughty kids straight. He advertises that he will scare your children into submission, essentially. That's putting it very lightly. There's a lot more nuance to this documentary, but it's pretty rad because, like, you think that, like, you're seeing this old, you never actually see who the real dude is, who's Wrinkles. You only see him in his costume. For the majority of the documentary, you're seeing what we find out is an actor playing the old man uncostumed, which is really interesting because this guy went to new levels of anonymity to create this character. But then we do eventually see the real quote unquote Wrinkles, but he's blacked out and is very clearly using a voice modulator. The documentary is a really interesting discussion of like what the internet has done to what a term that I hadn't thought about or heard, digital folklore. What, like Slender Man?
Okay.
Because Slender Man wasn't real. It was part of a creepypasta contest, and somebody came up with a Photoshop that looked really awesome.
And it led to real life murders.
And it did. And so they do show these children, because Wrinkles does have a phone number, like a legit phone number and a legit web presence. And so it became this like game. They interviewed a few different children in the documentary from all across the country that like will call the number. Because they're like, it's like a Bloody Mary type situation, but it's this real dude. And the guy in anonymity was saying, like, I really did not count on this taking off in that way or becoming this big of a phenomenon. But he said that the mask that he found, that he uses it as Wrinkles, which is super creepy, like worse than the creepiest clown mask you can imagine. He said that he chose it because he found it somewhere and it reminded him of Michael Myers and his grandfather.
Oh, God.
Which I thought was hilarious. And so it's just a really interesting commentary on what the internet can do to digital folklore, which I think is a really interesting phrase and a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend this documentary. You won't go to bed scared necessarily, but it's awesome.
It'll make you think.
It was really well done. And he is certainly creepy looking as fuck. So
All right. I saw this.
highly recommend.
And I was like, Wrinkles the Clown.
I thought it was a joke. I seriously thought it was a joke.
No, I'm glad you watched it first and recommended it because I'm going to have to check it out. All right, so just a couple more movies that I've watched. The Nun, did not enjoy that. James Wan, one of the writers. I'm going to say I love the Conjuring series. And I do like the most recent Annabelle movie. It wasn't great, but it was fine. It was more enjoyable than the first Annabelle movie.
I just have to say that I agree. I actually quite like James Wan when he's a director, when he's fully in charge. But I just have to say that I watched this with a friend of mine and I was ripping on it like you would a stupid horror movie from the beginning. Like I was making comments, whatever. And my friend was pissed at the end because he was like, that was terrible. And I was like, well, what did you think we were watching? And he thought it was going to be genuinely scary. And I was like,
it didn't scare me.
No.
To me, every scare was predictable. With The Conjuring, that scared me. The first and second one legit scared me.
Even though the second one is a giant stretch on the original story, it was still, as a fictional movie, I thought very good and very well done and very scary.
And I have nothing against high budget horror movies.
No,
like if
not
that's what you want to do, go for it. Because there's some really good ones. And which brings me to my next movie is Dead Silence, which I also watched.
Which I never finished.
What? Oh.
I have to finish it. I started watching it with a friend and then had to go home. And okay, so
we'll go finish it. Well, also James Wan. Now this is
super good.
It's really good. And this is a high budget horror movie done right. And I loved it. And the last movie I'm going to mention is The Burning, which stars a young, well, I shouldn't say stars because he's more of a co-star. It has a young Jason Alexander who plays George from Seinfeld, full head of hair, Holly Hunter, who is only in it for maybe like 2 really small scenes. Okay. Like she's like if you blink, you kind of miss her.
I love her.
But it's such a good 80s horror movie because we looked up, Spencer and I, we looked up like top slasher movies from the 80s because I have such a soft spot for 80s slasher flicks. I love them so much. And this was one that neither of us had heard of before. And it was really good. And I'm surprised that it's not more well known.
Because it's his first, right? James Wan is his first. Isn't that his first?
We're not talking about James Wan anymore, Mindy. Catch up. We're talking about 80s slasher movies now. The Burning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Starring young Jason Alexander. It's okay.
I did lapse a second and was the second behind.
That's all right. Too much pumpkin beer.
No, that's awesome. I want to see Jason Alexander with hair. That might be scary enough, really.
He was kind of cute. In a way. But yeah, I highly recommend this movie. And it was not, there's a little bit of cheese factor. But overall, it was creepy and a little scary. And there's a really freaky scene that takes place on a homemade wooden raft. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Check it out. And I think we watched it on Vudu.
The internet. I'll find it. I have one more movie that I wanted to talk about, and it was one that came up during our last pumpkin beer tasting, during our trivia. but I watched The Butterfly Room, which
Yes, Ray Wise.
yes, stars Ray Wise and the
Nancy from...
Heather Langenkamp, but above all of them, the badass Barbara Steele. As of 2012, which is when this movie was made, she still got it. It's all I gotta say. But I didn't think it was scary necessarily, but I had a blast. Like, I literally want to own this movie. It wasn't a B movie necessarily, but it sort of was. But Barbara Steele has still got it, and she could scare the pants off of anybody. She's amazing. Ray Wise, as mentioned, is in it, and there is a blatant wrapped in plastic nod. Not even a nod.
Nice.
Like, it's not even a wink. Like, it's pretty blatant, and he's even in the scene. But it's not so campy that he, like, you know, like in
Well, for those of you who don't know who Ray Wise is, he was on Twin Peaks. So the wrapped in plastic is a Twin Peaks reference.
That's right.
For all of you who don't know what that is, and for all of you who do not know what Twin Peaks is, go watch Twin Peaks because it's the best fucking TV show ever, and it's scary and creepy. And...
So yeah, like there was a wrapped in plastic, very obvious, but like it also stars. The movie has cameos from a bunch of horror movie favorites like PJ Souls, and I don't know the girl's name, but the girl who's the final girl in the original Friday the 13th, she's in it for like 5 seconds.
Oh, okay. And
but it's adorable. And then, yes, as mentioned, Heather Langenkamp is in it, who's Nancy from the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that technically she and Barbara Steele are like the leads. And to see the two of them go head to head, I was losing my shit in a good way. It is creepy technically. Like, I didn't go to bed scared, but it was such a blast to watch all of these people showing up in these little scenes. And also, at least as recent as 2012, to see Barbara Steele vamping that shit up, I was super psyched. I loved it. So
awesome.
I had to rent it from YouTube, I think, but it was only like $4 or something. I highly recommend. It's a good time. The Butterfly Room. Check it out.
I think I'm going to watch that one tonight.
Oh, God, it's so good. I want to watch it with you, actually.
No.
No, bitch, you're going home.
No, bitch. So anyways, that is our horror movie roundup.
Not to be confused with whores.
Yes, but if you want to watch horror movies all month, go ahead.
About horrors or horror, whichever you choose. We go for horror, but...
Yeah, so hopefully we gave you a couple of recommendations in there. And also, we appreciate your recommendations. So if you have any, please give us a shout out on the social medias or email us at whorestalkhorror@gmail.com. Also, send us any of your Halloween stories or anything else maybe you want to hear us talk about in the future, because
ooh, yeah, like recommendations or yeah, absolutely,
because unfortunately Halloween month is going to be over before we know it, and we're going to be getting into the holiday seasons with Thanksgiving and Christmas, which are not my favorite times of the year,
but they deal with ghosts technically, so we're going to keep going, like Holy Spirit, blah blah blah.
Are we though?
Well, we're gonna still talk about scary shit.
That sounds like Jesus
the point
to me. We're not gonna be talking about Jesus.
No, but we're still gonna talk about scary shit.
Yes,
so
of course. We're always gonna be talking about
keep it coming.
Scary
for those
shit.
of you that have written in, thank you, and please keep writing in more.
Yeah, and as always,
thanks for getting creepy with us.